The class was told to make a weapon. Deathworld Girl broke a table leg and called it a spear. The training hall smelled of charged alloy and something biological, sweet, faintly wrong, like fruit left too close to a power cell. Observation Registrar Thosvel noticed it every assessment morning. His 6 lemens extended slightly in the presence of high-energy fabrication materials, a reflex, like a nose twitching. He pressed them flat against his sides, opened his intake log, and began to read. 91 cadets, 90 species represented, fabrication potential index scores ranging from 6 to 9, equipment access, full tier. Then, at the bottom of the roster, one entry that did not fit. Cress Nara Human, World of Origin, Threshold Station, FPI score 2. Thosvel read it twice. Then he began drafting the non-completion notice, not unkindly, not dismissively, just efficiently. He had done this 11 times across his career. A cadet without the physiological or neural substrate to fabricate anything of assessment value was a cadet better redirected to logistics, and the paperwork was cleaner if it was ready before the drill began. He did not look up when the human walked in. She was compact, unremarkable in silhouette. The medical intake scanner had already logged her as sub-average musculature for a combat track. She carried no equipment. She chose a seat in the 3rd row, set her elbows on her knees, and looked around the hall with mild interest, the way someone watches a cooking demonstration for a meal they already know how to make. One finger tapped against her knee, slow, deliberate. Thosvel filed that detail under no category and returned to his log. Sub-Proctor Rentakal entered at the 7th hour mark precisely. His 6 limbs moved in the smooth, controlled cadence that Vethri instructors trained for 30 years to achieve. His subharmonic voice filled the hall without effort. Most species experienced it as mild authority pressing down from slightly above. Today, he said, you will prove your worth. Everything in this room is a material. Build a weapon. You have 40 minutes. The hall erupted. A Silvix Cadet 2 rose forward through both amperes wide, electrokinetic current already sparking between his fingertips. Plasma condensed in the air ahead of him, pulling into a blade shape that hummed at a frequency Thosvel's sensor clusters registered as significant threat. Beside him, a Taveth cadet named Quellen was growing a reactive bioform from her wrist node. It pulsed green, then dark, then settled into something barbed. A Kari quadruped named Serath dragged a length of vibrational alloy from the fabrication rack and began resonance tuning it with 2 of his 4 feet. Nara Cress did not move. She sat with her elbows on her knees and watched each cadet work. Her expression was not alarmed, not confused, not particularly interested. One finger tapped her knee 3 times, then went still. Thosvel noted her stillness in his log. Cadet Cress, probable non-participation, non-completion notice, continue drafting. Somewhere in the 2nd row, a cadet Thosvel identified as a Lari, feathered, small, fast, leaned toward a neighbor and said something in a voice pitched low, but not low enough. What's a human going to do? Wave a spoon at us? Nara did not respond. She did not look at the Lari cadet. She tapped her knee twice more, then stood up. She walked to the front of the hall, empty-handed. 2 cadets looked up, then 3. The Silvix with the plasma blade did not. His weapon needed attending. Most of the room was occupied with its own output. Nara crouched beside a regulation training chair. It was a standard-issue hall chair, ceramic-framed, the kind bolted in stacks outside every assessment room in the academy. She looked at it for a moment. Then she gripped the front leg with both hands. She yanked. The crack was a gunshot. Several cadets flinched. The Taveth cadet's bioform lurched sideways. A Kari limb knocked a tool from the fabrication rack. Serath's vibrational alloy went briefly out of tune. Thosvel's fingers stopped moving on his log terminal. The chair tipped backward, 3-legged, and Nara straightened up holding a section of ceramican composite tube roughly 40 centimeters long, one end jagged where it had broken from the frame. She looked at it, then at the floor. She sat cross-legged where she stood, set the broken end to the ceramic surface, and began to scrape. Long, smooth, deliberate pulls, not rushing, not performing. The sound was unpleasant, a dry grinding that cut under the hum of the plasma blade and the wet pulse of Quellen's bioform. A Danaki scout named Vosh, across the room, turned to look. He watched for 4 seconds and turned back. Thosvel did not type anything for 43 seconds. Then he resumed the non-completion notice and stopped again before he finished the sentence. The scraping continued. It changed pitch slightly as the angle of her strokes changed, shorter pulls now, more careful, working the taper. She tested the edge twice with her thumb, frowned once, and adjusted. When she stood, the chair leg was a spear in the loosest possible sense, roughened wood composite, one end honed to a functional point, nothing more. She held it loose and low at her side. She faced the hardened combat dummy at the far end of the hall. The dummy was rated to withstand plasma, bioacid, and impact up to 40 kilonewtons. It had absorbed 17 years of cadet assessments. There was a faint discoloration across its chest from a particularly energetic Sivhari cadet 2 terms ago, but otherwise it looked entirely unbothered by everything the Academy had ever thrown at it. Nara threw the spear. It was not a dramatic throw. There was no run-up, no shout, no particular ceremony. She stepped, turned her hips, released. The shaft left her hand at an angle that seemed, to Thosvel, slightly off, too low maybe. He had a brief, clear thought that it was going to skip along the floor. It buried a quarter-meter into the dummy's chest. Splinters fell. The dummy rocked back 2 centimeters on its base mount. Then it settled. The shaft vibrated for a moment, then went still, embedded deep enough that the entry point had compressed the dummy's outer layer inward. No one laughed. Thosvel became aware that his 6th lemend had extended to its full reach without his noticing. He retracted it. The Silvix cadet, the one with the plasma blade, full electrokinetic fabrication, the most impressive weapon in the room, set his blade down and stepped toward the dummy. He gripped the embedded shaft with both arm pairs. He pulled. Nothing. He shifted his grip, braced his lower limbs, and pulled again. The shaft did not move. The dummy rocked slightly with the effort, but the wood held, the entry wound held, the angle of impact held everything in place as if it had been designed to. He stepped back. He tried once more with all 4 limbs, lower pair for leverage, upper pair hauling. Nothing. Nara, who had sat back down, said, at conversational volume, "Angle's wrong. It's splintered on entry." The Silvix cadet stepped back from the dummy. He did not say anything. Rentakal was writing in his datapad. He did not look up immediately. When he did, he looked at the dummy, then at Nara, then back at his pad. He said, "Humans don't need technology. Anything can become a weapon." He said it the way someone notes an unexpected variable, adding it to a column, not celebrating it. Then he moved on. He did not update her FPI score. He did not look at her file again. Thosvel looked at his half-drafted non-completion notice. He had reached the line that read, "Cadet demonstrates insufficient fabrication substrate to produce an item of assessment value." He read that line 3 times. Then he opened a new field below the notice and typed, "Anomaly flag, pending review." He did not know what the flag would find, but he did not delete it. The spear stayed in the dummy. At the end of the period, when cadets began dismantling or storing their weapons, no one touched the chair-leg spear. 2 cadets walked past the dummy and did not look at it directly. The Danaki scout Vosh paused at a distance of about 3 meters, studied the embedded shaft for a moment, and walked on. Rentakal logged his assessment notes as the hall emptied. Thosvel watched him work, the smooth, efficient keystrokes of someone who had done this particular task for many years and trusted his taxonomy entirely. The intake index on Rentakal's terminal showed Threshold Station's world rating clearly, Class 6. Low environmental complexity, prolonged habitation not advised. Thosvel noted the rating in his own log. Then he noted, separately, non-completion notice, not filed. Somewhere to the rear of the exiting cadets, Nara paused at the door. She did not look back at the dummy or the spear still buried in its chest or the room in general. She looked at her thumb, the one she'd tested the edge with, where a thin red line marked the pad. She pressed it flat against her knee for a moment, then walked out. Thosvel filed his anomaly flag and closed the intake log. The chair, three-legged and tipped sideways in the middle of the hall floor, sat where she'd left it. No one had moved it. It was not clear whose job that was. If this were a standard assessment, Thosvel typed into the margin of his own notes, I would file the non-completion and move on. But she completed it. She simply completed it differently than the index predicted. I am going to need a different category. He did not have one yet. Stay close. I need to tell you what she did on the day the fault line opened, because that is where the index broke, and the index had been broken for longer than any of us knew. The first week after the assessment, the chair-leg spear stayed in the dummy. No cadet volunteered to remove it. This was not, Thosvel noted carefully in his log, because they had been told not to. There was no instruction on the matter. The dummy simply stood at the far end of the training hall with a chair leg buried a quarter-meter into its chest, and cadets entered the room each morning and set up their drills at the opposite end. On the third day, the Silvix cadet arrived early. Thosvel was already at his station. The Silvix walked to the dummy alone, gripped the shaft once, and left without pulling. He did not look around to see if anyone had noticed. He walked to his usual position and began his warm-up sequence. Thosvel added a line to his anomaly flag. Day 3, spear remains. Second extraction attempt, none. Nara attended every morning session. She came in, chose a seat, not always the same one, set her elbows on her knees and watched. She did not avoid the dummy. She did not stare at it either. She watched cadets work the way she had watched them fabricate, mild interest, nothing more, one finger occasionally tapping her knee when she was deciding something. On the fifth day, Rentakal assigned team groupings for the breach simulation. He read from his datapad without looking up. Quellen and Serath were grouped with a Dithri specialist and a wall-climbing Edhari cadet. Vosh went with the Lari scout and 2 other small-build cadets. Nara was assigned to Quellen and Serath's team. Quellen received this information with the expression of someone rereading an error in a transit schedule. Serath's 4 feet adjusted slightly on the floor. A Kari recalibration tell that Thosvel had learned meant unexpected variable. Nara was already writing something in a small notebook she carried, not notes, exactly. The page was mostly blank space with 1 or 2 marks that looked more like rough angles than words. She capped the notebook and put it away. Rentakal moved on to the next grouping. He had not consulted her FPI score when making assignments. The score was FPI 2. It reflected a world the Bureau had rated Class 6 low complexity, minimal improvised fabrication pressure. The score said, Observer track. The score said, Logistics. The score said the cadet in front of him had grown up somewhere that asked very little of the people who lived there, and had therefore produced a person who was unlikely to surprise anyone. The score was sourced from an index that updated on an 18-month cycle. Thosvel did not know that yet. He looked at the FPI-2 notation on his terminal. He looked at the dummy. He typed one more line into the anomaly flag. The index may not be current. Request under consideration. He did not file it yet. He did not know what he was waiting for. In the hall, Nara put her notebook in her pocket and stood up. And across the room, the 3-legged chair sat where it had sat for 5 days, and no one had moved it, and the morning light from the orbital panels came in at an angle that caught the shaft of the embedded spear and made it look, briefly, less like a broken piece of furniture and more like something that had been placed there on purpose. Thosvel closed his terminal and prepared for the next assessment. Quellen did not want to run point. This became clear in the staging area outside the breach simulation chamber, where she stood with her wrist node pulsing slow green and her shoulders angled slightly away from Nara, toward Serath, in the manner of someone finding a more promising conversation partner. Serath's 4 feet were planted. He looked at Nara, then at the chamber door, then at Nara again. "You ran the pre-assessment drill," he said. His Kari accent flattened the vowels into something careful and polite. "First week," Nara said. "Against the basic drones." "Yes." Serath's feet did not move. This was, Thosvel noted from his monitoring station, the Kari equivalent of a very loud silence. The breach simulation chamber was a maze, 400 square meters of shifting wall panels, pressure trigger floors, and two teams of opposing cadets who would be trying, with some enthusiasm, to stop them from reaching the hostage beacon at the center. The walls reconfigured every 90 seconds. The lighting ran red. Thosvel logged his pre-assessment note. Cadet Kress assigned as point operative. FPI score 2. This is an anomaly. Her score indicates observer track. I have flagged this in my incident log and am monitoring the trial for any data relevant to my pending review request. He did not flag it to Rentakal. He was not certain why. Rentakal had moved on to the next team grouping. He worked from his datapad. The FPI column was visible on his screen if he scrolled left, but he had not scrolled left in 4 sessions. Thosvel made a note of that too. 31%. That was the Academy's dropout rate at the first live assessment tier, cadets who lacked, in the official language, fabrication-sufficient neural or physiological architecture. 1 in 3. Most were redirected within the first month. The ones who stayed past that mark rarely left. Thosvel had been filing non-completion notices for 11 years. He knew the shape of a 31% cadet. They hesitated at the materials rack. Their instruments registered effort without output. Sometimes they were the kindest, most careful cadets in a cohort. It simply did not translate to fabrication, and the taxonomy was clear on what came next. The taxonomy had not given him useful guidance on a cadet who broke a chair and honed a point in 4 minutes flat. He added the 31% figure to his anomaly log and opened the chamber feed. Nara ran point. She moved through the first corridor in the particular way Thosvel had begun over the past week to recognize. No wasted motion, no hesitation at corners, a consistent spacing between her footfalls that was slightly longer than her frame would suggest. She checked angles. She used walls the way a larger body would use cover, not hiding behind them, but letting them work for her, moving along surfaces rather than across open space. Quellin came second, bioform pulsing at her wrist, jaw tight. Serath came last, 4 feet quiet on the pressure trigger floor in a way that Thosvel recognized as trained skill. Kari instinctively distributed their weight across all 4 contact points, which made them harder to detect on vibration-sensitive flooring. He was the most naturally suited cadet for this environment. He was eliminated in the second room. The opposing team came through a panel junction Thosvel had not tracked. The wall reconfiguration had opened a gap the monitoring system logged half a second late. 2 cadets with dual stunners and a wall-climbing Edhari who had gone vertical on the junction seam and was invisible until she wasn't. Serath took 2 stunner hits simultaneously from opposite angles before his feet could adjust. He dropped cleanly, lit up orange for eliminated, and the pressure floor registered his absence. Quellin swung wide, missed the first stunner wielder by half a meter, overextended, got flanked by the second. Orange. 8 seconds, both of them. The Edhari was already moving for Nara. Thosvel gripped the edge of his terminal. He became aware of this and released it. Nara had gone sideways into a maintenance alcove in the junction wall, a gap between a service panel and the wall structure itself, barely wide enough for her silhouette. She was not hiding. She was looking at the service panel, running one hand along its edge, and when she pulled it free, the sound it made was a flat, dry crack, considerably quieter than the chair leg had been. A panel of maintenance-grade composite, roughly 60 centimeters by 40. She held it by one edge. The Edhari came around the corner at wall-climbing speed, which was fast and slightly downward-angled, which meant her arm that held the stunner was the arm currently gripping the wall, not the arm she intended to fire with, and she had approximately 1 second to get her grip right before she lost the ceiling and had to drop. Nara launched the panel like a discus. It was not aimed at the Edhari. It caught the arm of the first stunner wielder, the one who had gone for Quellin, at the elbow, knocked it back and sideways, and the stunner fired into the ceiling. The Edhari dropped early, adjusting for the noise. She landed poorly. Nara was already moving. She tagged the first stunner wielder with 2 fingers to the throat sensor cluster, the official tag point for their species, orange. She tagged the Edhari at the junction of wall and floor before the cadet had straightened, orange. She picked up the second stunner, which had clattered to the floor in the chaos, looked at it for one moment, and set it down again. Then she went to retrieve the beacon. The team scored, in the official assessment, low survival, high disruption value. The simulation ran a note alongside this: 2 out of 3 operatives eliminated prior to objective completion. Point operative continued solo. Objective reached. Quellin, in the debriefing room, said, "Why didn't you use the training baton? We were issued batons for this drill." Nara thought about it. "Timing," she said, "didn't need it for that." She was looking at her notebook when she said it. She closed the notebook and put it in her pocket. Quellin stared at the side of her head for a moment and said nothing more. Thosvel's log entry, filed that evening, was longer than usual. Cadet Kress improvised a deflection instrument from ambient infrastructure during a live team breach engagement. She did not use issued equipment. She was the sole operative to reach the objective. "I am upgrading my anomaly flag to a formal query. I want to be precise. This is not about whether she succeeded. She did succeed. What I cannot account for is that she succeeded using a piece of a wall. Her FPI score is 2. This score reflects a world with, per the Bureau's published index, low environmental complexity and minimal improvised fabrication pressure. The score predicts, in the standard model, that a cadet from that origin will default to issued tools and will not demonstrate spontaneous ambient fabrication under pressure. She used a piece of a wall. I am attaching the chamber footage to this log. I am going to forward it to the classification review desk. I do not know what the classification review desk does with anomaly flags. I have never filed one above the intake level before. I am filing this one regardless." He did not know that the classification review desk had a processing queue of 214 items. He would not find this out for some time. Nara reported to the medbay that evening. Thosvel had not known she was going to do this. The medbay intake log flagged her visit in his morning summary, which he received the following day. Kress, ENS self-referral, bruised ribs, impact, blunt, no fracture confirmed, compression wrap applied, return in 4 days for check. The cadet who had clipped her was Serath, whose shoulder had come down on her left side during the initial contact before his elimination. She had said nothing about it during the drill, the debrief, or the corridor afterward. She followed every instruction. She came back in 4 days. The follow-up note said, "Healing within normal range, cleared for full activity." The security drone that covered the dormitory corridor had logged her, 3 hours after the medbay visit, sitting cross-legged on her bunk with a length of hardwood trim she had taken from a repair supply bin, and a piece of flat stone she had apparently carried in from the outdoor range earlier that week. She was sharpening one end of the trim against the stone. Slow, deliberate, not showy. Thosvel watched the footage 3 times. He added a citation reference to his formal query. See also, dormitory footage, lay tower, cadet is not completing assigned work. Cadet is carving a shaft. His 6th lamend extended slightly as he typed. He noticed it and pressed it flat. The Calith Fisher Range was a coastal cliff formation attached to the Academy's ground campus, low gravity, salt air, geological fault lines that the training manual described as stable within operational parameters. Thosvel had always found this phrasing optimistic. Fault lines were not stable. They were simply quiet between movements. He said this to no one. It was not his assessment to run. The terrain extraction drill assigned Nara with Vosh and Marai, the Danaki scout and the Lari cadet who had whispered something at the assessment. Marai had not, to Thosvel's knowledge, repeated the remark. She moved through the briefing rooms with a new quality of stillness around Nara that was not quite avoidance and not quite respect, but somewhere in the territory between them. The objective was straightforward: locate a signal beacon, extract a dummy payload, return undetected by patrol drones. Nara ran point on the ground, which Thosvel noted in his log without comment. She was not the fastest across that terrain, and she was not the lightest. Vosh had biolenses that could read heat signature through rock. Marai had feathers evolved for wind drift navigation and a center of gravity that made cliff edges routine. Either of them was more naturally suited to coastal cliffwork. Nara moved across the ground in that same way she always moved, purposeful, unhurried, slightly longer footfalls than her frame suggested, reading angles. She found the beacon inside 12 minutes, which was 8 minutes faster than the drill's estimated average. Then the fault line moved. Thosvel felt it at his monitoring station as a brief vibration in the floor beneath his chair. Then his screen showed a gap opening in the topographic feed, a line across the cliff face that had not been there before, widening in the way that lines in rock widen when the rock decides it is done being one piece. The ground under Nara opened. She dropped 22 meters. There was no scream. Thosvel checked the audio feed twice, and there was no scream. There was the sound of rock against rock, a short impact sequence across two ledges, then a vertical drop, then nothing. Then, after 6 seconds, a breath that the audio feed picked up as a sharp intake. Then nothing again. Thosvel's 6 limbs extended to their full reach simultaneously, and he spent approximately 4 seconds not doing anything before he began filing the emergency extraction protocol. Vosh deployed anchor cables immediately. He was good at his job. The cables were out in under a minute, but the drop was deep, and the cliff face was unstable from the movement, and the angle was wrong for a direct line. The system estimated retrieval time at 40 minutes. Over the team comm, a voice came through, steady, slower than usual, breath managed. Still breathing, ankles gone, you go for the beacon. Quellen, monitoring from the staging zone, said, "What?" But Vosh was already moving, cables trailing, toward the beacon's position. Because the voice had been calm, and because calm voices in those situations are, Thosvel had found, considerably more alarming than panicked ones. Hold position, the extraction protocol said. Await retrieval. Estimated time, 40 minutes. Thosvel typed into his incident log, hands not quite steady. Cadet Kress has sustained a confirmed ankle injury in a geological event during the Kalath-Fisher Range extraction drill. She has been instructed to hold position. Extraction protocol is active. Estimated retrieval, 40 minutes. He looked at the camera feed for the canyon floor. The feed showed a dim crevice, a debris field, a surveillance post half buried in rubble from a previous geological event, and just visible at the edge of the frame, a small shape that was not lying down. She is not holding position, he typed. He stopped. He looked at the feed again. Then he typed, I need a different category for this cadet. I do not have one. He forwarded the live feed to his formal query and marked it urgent, a classification review. Somewhere below the cliff face, 22 meters down, Nara Kress was already moving in the dark. She fabricated the brace in the dark. Thosvel watched on the canyon feed, the image grain, the low light, the shape of her moving through the crevice debris in a way that was deliberate and unhurried, in a manner that made no sense for someone with a torn ligament and a probable wrist fracture at the bottom of a 22-meter drop. The surveillance post was half buried in rubble from a previous fault shift. Old model, decommissioned, the kind the Academy kept on the range because removing them was more expensive than leaving them. She pulled the outer panel free. It gave her a metal strip. The interior wiring yielded cordage. The antenna had snapped clean at its base, and she worked it loose with her good hand and her teeth, which was when Thosvel looked away from the feed for a moment to compose himself. Then he looked back. She cinched the brace, 2 snapped rods for structure, the antenna as a frame, why a cordage wound in 3 tight passes above and below the ankle joint. She did it by feel in the dim, checking the tension with her fingers twice. When she was done, she sat for a moment with her hands flat on her knees. Then she stood. The bad leg took weight. She started climbing. It took her 1 hour and 4 minutes. Thosvel knew this because he timed it, not because the extraction protocol required him to, but because at some point in the second 20 minutes, he had stopped pretending to file anything else and had simply watched. The feed showed her ascending in long, careful sequences, both hands finding holds, the good leg driving, the bad leg dragging, and then catching and holding more than it should have been able to. Her palms were tearing. The feed's resolution was not high enough to confirm this clearly, but the way she adjusted her grip at intervals told him enough. She did not rush. She did not fall. At the 1 hour mark, Vosh arrived at the ledge with the extraction rig. He had retrieved the beacon, run the return route at full speed, and come back for her. He anchored the rig at the ledge edge and looked down, and she was 7 meters below him and climbing. He watched her for approximately 30 seconds. Then he sat down on the ledge and waited. She pulled herself over the top on her forearms, rolled onto the flat rock, and lay there for a moment looking at the orbital light. Then she sat up. Vosh said, "You shouldn't have moved." "Wasn't planning on dying down there," she said. She said it the way someone states a scheduling preference. She was pressing both palms flat on her thighs, and Thosvel could see from the feed that her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was not. Vosh looked at the brace on her ankle. He looked at it for a long time. "You built that," he said. "It was not a question." "Had materials," she said. The Academy medical report filed 2 hours later: torn ankle ligament, hairline wrist fracture, heavy rib bruising compounding the earlier impact, 2 weeks off duty, 4 before full weight bearing. She followed every instruction. She came back for every check. She did not argue about any of it. The chair leg spear was still in the dummy. Thosvel noted both facts in his formal query and marked the query priority escalation, Classification Bureau Direct. He had moved past the classification review desk, which had 214 items in queue, and gone directly to the Bureau's intake portal, which had a different queue with different processing times that he had not yet looked up because he was not certain he wanted to know. He walked to Ren Takal's office. This was not required of him. His role was administrative. He filed incident logs, he observed assessments, he maintained intake records. Walking to a sub-proctor's office with a query that was not a completed incident report was outside his standard function. He went anyway. Ren Takal was reviewing the next cohort's intake files. His datapad was open, the FPI column visible, the scores running 6, 7, 8. He did not look up immediately. "The cliff fall," Thosvel said. "Cadet Kress." "I read the medical report." She fabricated an ankle brace from debris at the bottom of the crevice and climbed out on a torn ligament before extraction arrived. Ren Takal looked up. His stylus paused. She moved. "The protocol says hold position." "Yes," Thosvel said. A pause. She completed the exit. "Yes." Ren Takal looked at his datapad. He did not scroll left to the FPI column. He said, "The cadet has a documented tendency toward improvised solutions under stress. This is an asset within the appropriate classification tier. Her tier may need adjustment after full recovery." He made a note. "I'll review at the 6-week mark." Thosvel looked at the note. It said, "Kress, 6-week review, possible tier adjustment." It did not say, "Check the world of origin rating." It did not say, "Verify the Bureau index is current." It said 6 weeks, possible adjustment, and Ren Takal returned to his cohort files with the smooth efficiency of someone who had closed an item on a list. Thosvel walked back to his station. He opened the Bureau's intake portal. He typed formal reclassification query, world of origin rating, threshold station, current status versus published index. He submitted it. The portal returned, query received. Estimated processing time 7 to 14 days. Thosvel looked at that for a while. Then he looked at the chair leg spear in the dummy, visible through the training hall window from his station. It had been there for 3 weeks now. Someone had placed a small piece of plastond under the dummy's base, not official, no stamp, handwritten in a script that Thosvel's translation matrix gave him as, "Nothing in human hands is ever harmless." No name. Rentakal had seen it on his morning walkthrough. He had not removed it. Thosvel added the plastond note to his query as Exhibit 4. 14 days after the cliff fall, Nara walked back into the training hall on a support wrap. She was still limping. The wrap ran from mid-foot to mid-calf, and she favored the leg with every step, but she moved through the door with the same quality of unhurriedness that she moved everywhere, not performing the injury, not minimizing it either, simply carrying it the way someone carries a bag that is heavier than usual. Rentakal was at the far end. He narrowed his eyes. "You cleared re-entry." "Cleared yesterday. No restrictions except sprinting and prolonged load." He gestured toward the equipment racks. "Standard return protocol. The cadet selects from available equipment appropriate to their cleared activity level and runs a light assessment drill." Nara walked past the energy sticks, past the plasma batons, past the bioadhesive packs and the resonance tools and everything else on the rack. She crouched beside the repair pile at the room's edge, the bin where broken equipment waited for maintenance, and pulled out a bench slat, a flat piece of structural hardwood, roughly the length of her forearm, slightly warped at one end from whatever had broken it. The hole went quiet. She carried it to the edge of the room, knelt on her good leg, and set one end against the ceramic floor. Then she began to sharpen it, slower than the first time. The angle was different, shorter strokes, more deliberate, working the taper more carefully. The sound was quieter, too, not the hard grinding of the chair leg, but something more like a dry whisper. Several cadets had stopped their drills. Thosvel stopped typing. He restarted after approximately 90 seconds. When she finished, she stood. She did not throw the bench slat. She faced the dummy, the one with the chair leg spear still buried in its chest, and she lunged. A straight, short movement, good leg driving, bad leg steady. The slat embedded 2 inches. No splinters, no echo, a quiet, clean entry. She leaned on the shaft and looked at it. "Good enough," she said, to herself, barely audible, not to the room. The room heard it anyway. That was the moment Thosvel's sixth limend extended for the second time in 30 seconds, and he had to make a conscious decision not to retract it immediately because the retraction was taking more focus than the typing, and he needed to type. "The second spear is measurably more precise than the first," he wrote. "She has refined the technique in the interval between assessments, during which she sustained a torn ligament, a hairline fracture, and was confined to limited activity. The improvement is not incidental. She was thinking about it while she was healing. I'm including both spears as comparative data points in my formal query to the Bureau. The Bureau has not responded to my query. It has been 11 days. He paused, then he added, "The processing time estimate was 7 to 14 days. I am aware of this. I am noting the 11 days because I have begun to find the estimate unsatisfying." 3 days before the seminar, Thosvel received a partial acknowledgement from the Bureau's intake portal, query under active review. Additional documentation may be requested. He printed this. He did not know why he printed it. He folded it and put it in his desk. That evening, a chair went missing from the mess hall. Thosvel found out because the facilities log flagged it as a missing item, standard inventory, nothing urgent. One regulation training chair, standard issue, same model as the chair whose leg was currently mounted in a hardened combat dummy in the main assessment hall. The facilities log noted it as unlocated and left a note for maintenance. The following morning, one of the dormitory patrol drones logged an Orvali cadet named Serev crouched behind the Arboretum dome in the pre-dawn light with a chair leg and a piece of flat stone, moving his wrists in a motion Thosvel recognized immediately. He was mimicking her stroke exactly, the short pulls, the angle, the way she tested the edge with her thumb. He was not very good at it yet. The edge was uneven. He kept changing the angle, going back over sections that weren't right. He worked at it for 40 minutes before the morning alert sounded. Thosvel filed this in his query as Exhibit 5. He typed, "I am using cultural propagation as a placeholder taxonomy for what I am observing. I do not have a better term. I would welcome one." He did not have a better term either. The seminar was on the third day. Each cadet in the full assessment cohort could present one technique. Most presented on their native physiological toolkit: bioweapon refinement, electrokinetic field management, resonance tuning. Good presentations. Clear, applicable, well-structured. Nara did not volunteer. On the third day, Ren Takal called her name. She limped to the platform slowly. She stood in front of the full cohort, 61 cadets, 12 species, 3 sub-proctors including Ren Takal, and looked at the room for a long moment without speaking. Then she picked up a regulation training chair from the row beside the platform. The silence was immediate and total. She set it down in front of her gently, then she sat in it. "Where I come from," she said, "we don't always have the best tools. Sometimes we don't have decent ones." Her voice was conversational, the same volume she used for everything. "But we're taught early, adaptation beats equipment." She talked about wilderness scouts who made stretchers from fence rails and tarp, coal miners who splinted broken arms with broomsticks before anyone arrived to help, flood volunteers who did triage on kitchen tables, emergency medics in places where the supply ships came twice a year, if they came at all. Then, without ceremony, she stood, gripped the chair's front leg, and pulled. The crack was quieter this time, or the room was quieter. Either way, Thosvel heard it land differently than the first time, not a surprise, but a confirmation. She held the chair leg out to Marai, who was nearest. Marai took it, turned it over, passed it to the cadet beside her. It went around the room from hand to hand, 6-limbed hands, chitinous manipulators, tri-digit grips, each cadet holding it differently, turning it differently. It came back to Marai last. She looked at the edge and said, "Still not as sharp as your first one." "Didn't need to be," Nara said. She took it back and set it on the platform edge. No one applauded. They sat there, 61 cadets and 12 species, and the room had the particular quality of silence that is not empty but full, the silence of people doing arithmetic in their heads. Ren Takal was writing in his datapad. Thosvel watched him write and could not see what he was noting, and for the first time in his career, he wanted very much to see what was on someone else's datapad, because whatever Ren Takal was writing, it would tell him whether the sub-proctor's model was bending or holding. The model was holding. He could tell by the way Ren Takal wrote smooth, even keystrokes, nothing hesitant. The man was noting a technique, categorizing it, filing it under an existing heading. He did not scroll left to the FPI column. He had not scrolled left once. Thosvel added this to his query as Exhibit 6 and marked the whole file. "I believe something is wrong with the index. I believe it has been wrong for some time. I am waiting for the Bureau to confirm this. I do not know how long I will wait." That night, the Bureau's portal sent a second notice. Query under active review, additional documentation received, estimated response, 2 to 5 days. 2 to 5 days. Thosvel sat at his station and read it 3 times. He looked at the chair leg spear in the dummy. He looked at the bench slat beside it. She had left it there when the 2-inch jab was done, not pulled it free, just left it sitting embedded at the entry point like a marker. 2 spears, 1 dummy, 1 index that had not been updated. 2 to 5 days. He typed into his personal log, not the incident log, not the formal query, the private one he kept for notes that did not yet have a category. She was already climbing before the extraction rig arrived. She sharpened the second one better than the first. She sat in the chair. The room did not applaud. A cadet is behind the Arboretum dome right now, in the dark, learning her angle. I do not know what the Bureau will tell me, but I know what I am looking at. He closed the log and waited. The Bureau's response came on a Tuesday. Thosvel knew it was a Tuesday because the facility's log updated on Tuesdays, and he had been watching the portal's status indicator refresh every morning with the focus of someone who has run out of other things to watch. 7 to 14 days, the portal had said. It had been 13. The message was not long. Bureau documents rarely were. They were structured for intake clerks and classification officers who processed dozens per shift, and their economy of language was not elegance but volume management. Thosvel read it in under 2 minutes. Then he read it again. Then his 6 limbs extended to full reach. He did not retract them for approximately 2 minutes. He was aware of this. He did not do anything about it. The document was titled Formal Reclassification Confirmation, Threshold Station, GSB World Rating Index. It contained 4 sections. Section 1, Administrative Header, Query Reference Number, Processing Officer Designation. Section 2, The Finding. Section 3, Effective Date and Index Propagation Schedule. Section 4, A Note on Backlog Resolution Timelines and an Apology for Processing Delays. Section 2 read, Threshold Station, GSB Ref. T7741C was formally reclassified from Class 6, Significant Environmental Hostility, Prolonged Habitation Not Advised, to Class 9, Extreme Environmental Hostility. Habitation requires native adaptation or full protective infrastructure, effective 16 months and 4 days prior to the date of this confirmation. The reclassification followed a methane shelf collapse event in the station's southern continental shelf region, which restructured the local predatory fauna into a higher-order threat tier. The reclassification was processed and approved in full by the Bureau's classification board at that time. Its propagation to the published World Ratings Index was delayed by a processing backlog in the Index Maintenance Division. The backlog has since been resolved. The published index now reflects the current rating. The Bureau notes that any assessments conducted using the pre-reclassification rating during the 16-month propagation delay may be subject to review upon institutional request. Thosvel read section 2 3 times. He looked at the effective date. 16 months and 4 days ago, Threshold Station had become a Class 9 world. The methane shelf collapse, the predatory tier restructuring, all of it confirmed, documented, processed and approved by the Bureau's own classification board. The reclassification had existed in the system for over a year. It simply had not made it to the published index that Rentacol used to assign FPI scores. The FPI scoring system drew from the published index. The published index had been running 16 months out of date. Nara Kress had walked into this academy carrying a Class 9 world's worth of formation behind her eyes, and the intake system had looked at the published index, found a number that corresponded to a threshold station that no longer existed, and written FPI2 in her file. He looked at the chair-leg spear through the training hall window. She had made that the first day, on a world the Bureau had classified Class 9 16 months ago, on a world where, by the Bureau's own documentation, the fauna had restructured into a higher-order threat tier. She had grown up on that world, post-collapse, post-restructuring, in the years when the supply ships came every 14 months if they came at all, and she had walked into this hall and sat with her elbows on her knees while cadets with FPI scores of 7 and 8 admired their plasma-fabricated weapons, and then she had broken a chair. He thought about the non-completion notice he had drafted her first morning. He had not finished it. He had drafted it and paused and not returned to it. He had not known why at the time. He thought he might know why now. He printed the Bureau's confirmation. He folded it once cleanly along the document's natural crease. He picked it up. He walked to Rentacol's office. The sub-proctor was at his desk. The same position as always, datapad open, intake files loaded, the FPI column visible in the display's left margin. He looked up when Thosvel entered, not immediately, with the slight delay of someone completing a thought before acknowledging an interruption. Thosvel set the folded document on the desk. He did not say anything. There was nothing in his administrative function that required him to explain what he had placed on someone's desk. The document would explain itself. Ren Takal looked at it. He picked it up and unfolded it. He read it. Thosvel counted. 11 seconds. In 11 seconds, Ren Takal read Section 2 of the Bureau's confirmation, set the document flat on the desk, and did not move. His datapad was still open. The FPI column was still visible. The scores ran 6, 7, 8 along the intake list for the next cohort. His stylus was in his right hand. He had been writing when Thosvel entered. He was not writing now. He was looking at Section 2 with the expression of someone doing arithmetic whose answer keeps coming out the same wrong way. Then he set the stylus down. He opened the Academy's intake system. He navigated to the current cohort's file index. He found Nara Kress. He scrolled to the FPI field, the field he had reviewed on her first morning, the field that had said 2, the field that had prompted him to log, low environmental complexity, recommend observer track. He typed 9. He confirmed. He closed the record. He did not call her in. He did not make a note. He did not log aloud. He had corrected an entry in a file, the way someone corrects a data entry that has been wrong for longer than it should have been, with the specific quality of efficiency that is not indifference, but the absence of ceremony around something that cannot be made smaller by making it quiet. Thosvel picked up the Bureau's confirmation from the desk. Ren Takal said, without looking up, "How many weeks has she been in the cohort?" 11, Thosvel said. Ren Takal was quiet for a moment. Then, the cliff fall, the fabrication rate, the seminar. "Yes," Thosvel said. She was behaving consistently with a Class 9 classification the entire time. "Yes, and I was assessing her against a Class 6. "Yes, Ren Takal picked up his stylus again. He opened a new document, not a cadet file, not an intake form, an administrative report. His title line read, Intake Protocol Review, World of Origin Rating Verification, Proposed Amendment. Thosvel watched him write the first paragraph and then left. The Academy Directorate issued the amended protocol 4 days later. It appeared in the administrative bulletin the way most procedural changes appeared. A single entry, no preamble, no explanation of origin. Effective immediately, World of Origin ratings used for FPI assignment must be verified against the Bureau's live registry at the time of intake processing, not against the published index. Index verification dates must be logged in the intake record. A new column appeared in the system by the end of the day, rating verification date. The bulletin did not mention Nara Kress. It did not mention threshold station, or the methane shelf collapse, or the 16-month propagation delay, or the chairleg spear that was still embedded in a hardened combat dummy in the main assessment hall. It was a procedural update, that was all. Thosvel read it twice and then opened the incident log he had been maintaining since her first assessment and wrote at the bottom, "The protocol has been amended. The column now exists. This is the thing I was waiting for." He paused. Then he added, "I did not know I was waiting for it until it arrived." The 31% dropout figure, the rate of cadets who failed the first live assessment tier for lacking fabrication-sufficient architecture, was flagged for review by the Directorate's Intake Committee 3 days after the bulletin. Thosvel was not on the committee. He did not know the outcome. He knew the flag existed because the committee's meeting agenda was a matter of administrative record, and he had, out of something he declined to examine too closely, checked it. He did not add this to any formal document. He noted it privately and moved on. The betting had dissolved. Thosvel had not officially flagged the cohort's informal betting pool. It was small. It was the kind of thing that existed in every intake period. It was not his function to manage cadet recreation unless it crossed into documentation. It had crossed nothing. It had simply stopped. One morning it existed, and the following morning it did not, and no one announced this. The cadets who had been most vocal about her FPI score in the first week had not become vocal in the opposite direction. They were quiet. They were the specific kind of quiet that is not regret but recalibration, the silence of people who have updated a model and are not yet sure what they have updated it into. The hall had a different quality now when she entered it. Not fear, not reverence, something less named. The extra seconds before conversations resumed. The way a cadet would check where she was before beginning a drill that involved improvised equipment, as if the spatial awareness of her location in the room was now relevant information. She was warm. This was the part that Thosvel found most difficult to categorize. She visited Serath in the medbay when his carapace plates fractured in a separate gravity drill, unrelated to her, a training accident, bad angle on a low-grav impact, and she brought broth, even though Kari receptor chemistry could not process the flavor, and this was common knowledge. She knew it was common knowledge. She brought it anyway. Serath drank it anyway. No one in the room mentioned either of these facts. Mirai stopped her in the corridor after. He mocked you, Mirai said. After the spear, he said it was luck. Why do you bother? Nara considered this. People say things when they're scared, she said. Not of me, of what I represent. She adjusted the grip on her support wrap. It's easier to call it luck. She went to lunge. Thosvel, who had been 2 meters away, reviewing a wall-mounted schedule he had not needed to review, added nothing to any log. The wrist brace came off on a Thursday. She ran a full lap of the outer track, regulation distance, nothing extra, and came back at a pace that was not impressive and was not meant to be. She was testing load, not demonstrating capacity. She stopped, checked her wrist with 2 fingers, moved on. No one had organized a moment around it. There was nothing official. She had cleared a medical milestone and run a lap and returned to the hall. The Orvali cadet Serev, who had been found carving behind the Arboretum dome in the pre-dawn light, was working on his 3rd attempt at the edge angle. He had gotten better at it. The taper was cleaner. He had not asked her for instruction, and she had not offered it. But twice she had paused near the repair pile when he was working nearby, and once she had said, very quietly, shorter stroke at the end, and he had adjusted, and the edge had come out right. She had not watched him do it. She had already moved on. The final siege simulation ran on a clear morning, low orbital light, open field behind the Academy's east face. All cadets, full cohort. The scenario, a fortified position, resource limited, 2 hours to hold against an advancing force with energy weapons and 3 coordinated teams. The energy weapons in Nara's sector ran dry at the 40-minute mark. This happened sometimes in siege simulations. It was in the scenario parameters, not guaranteed, but weighted. It was one of the things the simulation tested. Thosvel was monitoring from the observation ridge with 2 other registrars. He watched her team's sector on the feed. She had broken tent poles before the weapons ran dry. She had done it methodically during a lull in the first exchange without announcing what she was doing. 3 poles, snapped at the midpoint, edges tested. The top hooks were already in her kit. She had taken them from the equipment cache at the simulation start, which was permitted. The cache contained multiple item types, and cadets were free to select. When the energy weapons emptied, her team did not break formation looking for alternatives. They already had them. The advancing forces timing model assumed a sector pause while the defending team reconfigured. There was no pause. The scenario assessment at the end read, Nara Kress, Cohort Team, Sector 4, Resource Adaptive Response, above projection. Scenario passed. It did not say she had won. She had not won. The fortified position fell at the 1 hour 50 mark, 10 minutes before the scenario end, but passed was the designation, and it was accurate. They had not broken. They had used what was there. Thosvel wrote in his log, she prepared for the depletion before it occurred. The tent poles were staged. I reviewed the simulation footage, and she made the decision to break them at minute 7 when the energy levels were still adequate. She was not reacting. She was already planning for when she would need to. He paused. I do not know when she learned to do this. I think it was before she arrived here. The chair leg spear was removed from the dummy on a Friday afternoon. The dummy was being rotated out of service, standard equipment cycling, nothing remarkable. The maintenance team noted the embedded object, logged it, and flagged it for disposal processing. Standard decommission. By Monday morning, it was in a case near the Academy's entrance hall. Thosvel did not know who had arranged this. The case was a standard display mount, the kind used for commemorative equipment, the kind that appeared after records were broken or assessments passed with unusual distinction. It was anchored to the wall beside the entrance hall's schedule board, where cadets passed twice daily going in and out. The case contained the chair-leg spear. The placard below it was not authorized by the Directorate. Thosvel could tell because authorized placards had a format, institution header, designation code, date stamp. This one had none of those. It was plain plastoned, engraved in a clean, functional hand, and it read, "Improvised, effective, human." No name, no date, no designation code. By Tuesday, it had been there long enough that cadets had begun to pass it the way you pass a thing that has become permanent, without stopping, but with a slight angle of awareness, the body acknowledging it without the gaze making a formal visit. The Orvali cadet, Serev, paused in front of it for a long moment on his way to morning drill. He did not touch the case. He looked at the spear for a while and then went in. Thosvel stood at the entrance hall's far wall and watched this, and then opened his incident log and typed his final entry. The placard was not submitted for Directorate approval. I have noted its existence. I checked this morning whether a removal recommendation had been filed by any administrative office. None has been filed. I am not filing one. I am closing this log. He saved it. He marked it complete. He sent it to the archive with a subject line that read, DWG-001, Cadet Cress, Nara, assessment period, closed. She passed the case on a quiet evening, 10 days after it appeared. The entrance hall was empty, late enough that the day's last drill period had ended, early enough that the mess hall hadn't cleared. The orbital light came through the high panels at a low angle, and the case caught it, and the spear inside had the color of something older than it was. She stopped. She was not on her way anywhere urgent. She had her kit bag over one shoulder, and she was still in her training wrap, the one that meant she had come directly from the hall, and she stood in front of the case for what Thosvel, watching from the corridor junction, estimated at roughly 40 seconds. She was not remembering the throw. He could tell this, though he could not have said exactly how by the quality of her attention. It was not backward-looking. She was looking at the object itself, the grain of the wood, visible even through the case front, the angle of the entry point where it had buried in the dummy. The way the edge she had sharpened on the training hall floor still held its taper even now. She reached out and touched the case front, briefly, just her fingertips, one pass. Then she adjusted her kit bag and walked out. Thosvel stood in the corridor junction with his incident log closed and his formal query archived and his 6 limbs fully extended in the empty hall, and the light came through the panels at its low angle, and the spear sat in the case, and the placard said what it said. He thought about the non-completion notice he had drafted and never finished. He thought about 11 seconds of silence before a sub-proctor updated a file. He thought about a cadet in the pre-dawn dark, learning an angle she had never been taught. He did not write any of this down. The log was closed. He had nothing to file it under. He stood there for a moment in the quiet entrance hall, all 6 limbs still extended, looking at a broken piece of chair that had entered a hardened combat dummy at a splintering angle on the first day of a fabrication assessment, and he thought, the index had 16 months to find her. The chair found her first.